Okay, good morning. So we're up to Shin Mem Hey, working through the first siman in Chelik Daled. We're up to Sif Ches. Says the Mechaba, Mavuos Harabim Tes Zayin Amos. So you've got so far. The story so far is we have defined the various Reshuyos, Reshus Hayachid, Reshus Harabim, and Mokum P'tur and the Karmelis, and now we're going into more details of different situations. So, Mavuos, alleyways, Harachavim Tes Zayin Amma, which is 16 Ammas wide, or Miskatzrim Biktsosov, and they narrow at points. Ve'ein Bohem Tes Zayin Amma, and at those points you haven't got 16 Ammas width. Yesh Oimrim She'em Arkon La'orach Reshus Harabim, if their length is the length of Reshus Harabim, Harihem Reshus Harabim. So it says Mishnah Berurah, Tol Sofer, that there's actually some mistake in the actual text. The Tzarech Loiman, it should read, the Mechaba should read as follows: B'Ktsason, that in part you haven't got a width of 16 ammas, or you haven't got 16 ammas, and the length is that of Reshus Harabim. Some say that they have the status still of Reshus Harabim. And the explanation of this sif is this: first, we're talking about an alleyway which narrows, and then it tells me a bigger chiddush. Even if the whole stretch of the alleyway you haven't got a width of 16 amma, since its length is Reshus Harabim and it's open on both sides, and people sort of pass through it, it's still considered part of the Reshus Harabim, and even though it's not necessarily wide 16 ammas at that point. And since the Mechaba doesn't say how narrow it gets, even if it's quite very narrow, and doesn't even hold 13 ammas, even if it's very narrow, it still will retain the status of Reshus Harabim. According to his opinion, it will still maintain its status of the Reshus Harabim. Okay, now carrying on the Mechaba. Tes Mavuos Harachavim Yud Gimel Amos Ushlish. You've got an alley which is 13 1/3 ammas wide, and both ends of that alleyway open up into a Reshus Harabim, Orach of Tes Zayin, which is 16 ammas wide. Yesh Oimrim Reshus Harabim. That also the alleyway, even though it's only 13 ammas wide, but since it is mafulish and it opens up to Reshus Harabim on both sides, which is 16 ammas wide, that even still the alleyway will have, the mavi will have a status of a Reshus Harabim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Yud Chavav, Yud Gimel Amos Ushlish, Svir Lehu, the B'shia Zeh, if the alleyway is of width 13 1/3, at the end of the day, it's useful for the Rabbim. They will be able to use it, even though it's a bit narrower than a regular Reshus Harabim. And it will help you, and it will assist when you've got both ends are open to a proper Reshus Harabim. That even this mavui in the middle will still be considered Reshus Harabim. V'ayin be'halacha. Yesh oimim Reshus Harabim. Chof Zayin says the Mishnah Berurah, "Zekimin the Reshus Harabim gemura yesh b'shnei rosheh." Since I've got a proper Reshus Harabim at both ends, or boikin barabim, and people walk through it, or mahalchim Reshus Harabim derech hamavui, and people go on the Reshus Harabim, and they're going from one end of the Reshus Harabim to another part of the Reshus Harabim through this mavui. Nimtza dahav tashmish Harabim gam bezu hamavui. Therefore, this mavui is considered a tashmish of the Rabbim. And therefore it's considered proper Reshus Harabim. It says in the Mishnah, I've got a problem, because further on in Siman Shin Samach Dalet, the Mavi Hamafulish B'shnei Rosheh Reshus Harabim Ein Dinah Reshus Harabim. Further on, we're going to say that if you've got a mavui and both ends open up to Reshus Harabim, it's the middle of the mavui is not considered Reshus Harabim, which is obviously contrary to what we've just said here. Mairi, there we're talking about Kashein Rochov Yud Gimel Amma. That's because the mavui in the middle is not 13 ammas wide. Or the Mairi Kasha Mavui Mefulish Mishnei Stodin, the Roich of Reshus Harabim the Ein Rabim Beiken by, or we're talking about a situation where ein Rabim boikim boy, i.e., people do not walk through the Reshus, the Rabbim do not walk through this mavu in the middle. So Misha Rabim the mavu who tzarech la'akim darkei, that he's got to sort of turn the corner and go round. V'kan, but here Ma'iri k'shamavu holech la'orech Reshus Rabim, you've got just a straight Reshus Rabim. And then you've got a mavui in between, which is mefulish to the Reshus Rabim on both sides. V'holchin derech mavui zulehedjel Reshus Rabim ha'acher shekenegdoi lochein yeshem Reshus Rabim gam al mavui. So therefore, our situation is different. Number one, you've got a mavui which is 13 1/3 amas wide, and number two, you've got Rabim boikim bay, and it's just a continuation of the long street. So you've got a long street. 16 amas wide, and then you've got a movi in the middle, which is a bit narrower. But since it's more than 13 1/3 wide, and Rabim Boikim Bay, the middle movi part has the status of a Reshus Harabim. Okay, Yud. Now, an interesting halacha. Kol dava sho b'Reshus Harabim. Anything which is in the Reshus Harabim, im eina gavoya shleisha tfachim, if it's not more than 3 tfachim off the ground, afilu hem kaitzim oitzoya she'ein rabim darsin aleim, even if it's thorns or animal or human excrement, she'ein rabim darsin aleim, where people are not going to walk on that, they're going to walk around that. Nevertheless, chashuvim kakarka v'havi Reshus Harabim. So anything less than 3 tfachim, which is on the grounds of Reshus Harabim, 3 tfachim is not very much, right? 3 handbreadths. So anything which is smaller than that, but is connected to Reshus Harabim, has the status of a Reshus Harabim. V'emu gavoya shleisha, but if it's more than 3 tfachim, or mishleisha ad tisha up to 9 tfachim, v'lo tisha bichlal, but not inclusive, imhu rachav arba al arba have a karmelis. So you've got, let's say, like a water fountain in the Reshus Harabim, and it's more than 3 tfachim tall, but it's not, it's 4x4 wide. Imagine 4x4 wide is, let's say, and you've got a water fountain or something like that in a Reshus Harabim, then that item will be considered like a karmelis. So again, less than 3 tefachim is just bottled to the Reshus Harabim and is considered part of the Reshus Harabim. If it's more than 3 tefachim, up to 9, but not inclusive 9, we'll see why, and it's more than 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide and long, then it will have a din of a karmelis. But if it's more than 3 tefachim high, less than 9, and it's less than 4x4 width and length, then it will have the status of a mokum patur. Yeah, everyone clear? Okay, so let's do the Mishnah Berurah. Let's just stop there for a minute and do the Mishnah Berurah. Sif kotzen chavches. Afilu hem kaitzim. So anything less than 3 tefachim high will be considered part of the ground. Afilu hem kaitzim. T'chol pachas mishleisha kaimel on de'ena chilekes reshus la'atzma. It doesn't have its own distinct reshus. Or bottle legabe Reshus Harabim, therefore is bottled to the Reshus Harabim and has the status of a Reshus Harabim. V'emu gavoya shleisha. If, however, it's more than 3 tefachim, the oz ein rabim yicholim nidros olav, because that's high enough that people are not going to just tread on it. Nafka miklal Reshus Harabim. Then it's no longer part of the Reshus Harabim. V'lichlal Reshus hayachid lo ba, and it doesn't yet become a Reshus hayachid ad gavoya asar tefachim. To be a Reshus hayachid, you've got to have 10 tefachim tall. So this is in between. V'nosnu aleh chachamim shem karmelis, and the chachamim gave this entity the status of a karmelis. Shehu Reshus la'atzma, it's its own Reshus. V'asa lahaitzi mimenu l'Reshus hayachid l'Reshus Harabim. Fine. So anything less than 3 tefachim is bottled to the ground and is considered Reshus Harabim. Anything more, if it's more than 10 tefachim high and 4x4 tefachim wide and long, then it's got a din of Reshus hayachid. If it's less than, it's between 3 and 9. If it's 4x4 tefachim, then it's got a din of a karmelis. Less than 4x4 tefachim, it's got a din of a mokum patur. Okay? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Kotzen Lamed, V'emein rochav arba al arba, afilu im arka yoyse me'arba tefachim, even if one side is more than 4 tefachim, lo mitzarfinan ze l'rchaba. We don't take the square area. We take it's got to be 4x4. Each side has got to have 4 tefachim. It's got to be 4x4. Okay, now let's carry on the mechaba. If this thing is 9 tefachim tall, mutzum exactly, v'rabim mekasim olav. And 9 tefachim tall is about the height of a table, so people could use it. They could lean on it. They could put things on it. then have a Reshus Harabim, afilu ein rochav arba. That has the status of Reshus Harabim, even though it's not necessarily 4 tfachim wide. Says the Mishnah Berurah on here, Lamed Aleph, Tisha tfachim, the Bashir zeh derech bnei Adam Reshus Harabim lekasef olav. Because if it's 9 tfachim high, people will use it. They'll lean on it in the Reshus Harabim to ein lo gevor v'lo nomach, because it's not too high and it's not too low. Avol b'pachas mitisha, but less than 9 tfachim, she'ein roy lekasef olav, which is a bit too low to lean on it. Lo mahani l'shavi Reshus Harabim, it does not therefore have the status of Reshus Harabim. Afilu im rabim mekasvim olav, even if people tend to do it and do lean on it, it still is not 9 tfachim, and therefore it does not have the status of Reshus Harabim. Mutzumtzomim, i.e. exactly 9. Avol yosim mitisha lo Reshus Harabim. If it's more than 9, then it's not going to have this status of Reshus Harabim. Afilu rochav arba al arba, because I guess if it's more than 9 tfachim, then it will now have the status of Reshus HaYochid once it's 10 tfachim and it's 4x4. I think that's what it means. V'rabim mekasim olav, and people lean on it. Avol kashe'ein mekasvin olav, but if they don't, afal gav the roy lekasav, even though they could, lo have Reshus HaYochid, lo have Reshus Harabim, afilu rochav arba. Then it will not have this status of Reshus Harabim, even though it's 4x4 wide. And then we just one more, 2 more actually. Lamed Daled, afilu ein rochav arba. So then we said, if it's exactly 9 tfachim, where are we? Yeah, we said if it's exactly 9 tfachim, Rabbi Mekasim Olav, then it's got a status of Reshus Harabim, even if it's not 4 wide. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Lamed Daled, the afal gav the ba'alma lo yavi mokum choshev b'pachas me'arba, even though generally speaking is not less than 4 is not called a mokum choshev. Kan derech harabim lekasevos, since people lean on it, after pachas me'arba meshavel Reshus Harabim. Still, at the end of the day, it's 9 tfachim high, and even though it may be less than 4 tfachim wide and long, nevertheless, people do lean on it, and therefore it will have the status of Reshus Harabim. Okay, back to the Machaba, 3 lines down. V'yesh mi she'omer dehu adin legvoya mitisha va'ad asora v'rabim mekasim olav. Some people say that even if it's more than 9 tfachim, even up to 10 tfachim, and Rabbi Mekasim Olav have Reshus Harabim, afilu ein rochav arba, that it's got the status of Reshus Harabim. Okay, so therefore I was wrong in what I just said before. That when I said 9 tfachim, it means mitzumza, it means exactly 9 tfachim, not 9.5 or 9.75. It means exactly 9. And now this Yesh Mi Shomer says no, anything between 9 and 10, and it hasn't got 4x4, it's got the same status of Reshus Harabim. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Hey, Dehu Adin legvoya mitisha do the asatur, that if it's more, even if it's between more than 9 tfachim, i.e. it's let's say 9.75 tfachim, and this is the opinion of the Tur, to svir lei the hodamrina begemara amud tisha, an amud, a pillar which is 9 tfachim high, who ba rakla fuke pachs mitisha, it's just coming to exclude anything which is less than 9. Lo have Reshus Harabim avol yosim mitisha, but if it's more than 9, i.e. up to 10, eino chanami dav Reshus Harabim. If people lean on it, then it will also have the status of Rabim. But la halacha, we don't go like this. We go like the first opinion, which says that it's got to be exactly 9, and Rabbi Mekasim Olav, then it will have the status of Reshus Harabim. Okay, let's finish off this sif. Now, what about more than 10? Imhu rochav arba, if it's more than 10 tfachim high, and it's 4x4 wide, in rochav arba, then have Reshus HaYochid. It will have the status of Reshus HaYochid. V'im lav, and if it's not, then have mokum patur. Afilu yesh b'mokum kedei lachuk lashlim la'arba. If it's not 4x4 wide, but even if you could be choykek and you could sort of theoretically carve out an area of 4x4, nevertheless, it will not have a status of Reshus HaYochid, and it will be considered a mokum patur. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Lamed Zayin, Imhu rochav arba, then hainu arba arba, i.e. is 10 tfachim tall, and it's 4x4 wide and long, then it will have the status of a Reshus HaYochid. Kedei lachuk hainu kagoin shehai amad samach l'kais l'mamish. For example, if the pillar is very close to the wall, afilu hachi lo aminan choykim lahashlim, we don't sort of theoretically carve out to be mashlim it. Umemela having mokum patur, and it still retains, is still considered mokum patur. Umutar lahitzi mimen and Reshus HaYochid Reshus Harabim, and therefore you can carry from it to Reshus Harabim, or the other way to Reshus HaYochid or Rabim, whichever way you want. So just to summarize, what have we said? You've got a Reshus Harabim, right? A regular Reshus Harabim, 60 numbers wide. According to Rashi, you've got 600,000 people going down it, etc., etc. What is the status of things in the Reshus Harabim? Anything within 3 tefachim of the ground has got a din of Reshus Harabim. It's bottled to the ground, even things which you wouldn't normally step on, kaitzim, tzaya, etc. More than 3 tefachim, up to 9 tefachim, and exactly 9 tefachim. If it's 4 by 4, then it's got a din of a caramelis, and you therefore cannot midrabanan carry from it to the Reshus Harabim, because you cannot carry from Reshus Yochid or Reshus Harabim to a caramelis, or vice versa. If it is not 4 by 4, then it's got a status of a mokum patur. If it's exactly 9, however, and Rabbim Mekasim, a lot of people lean on it, then it's got a din of Reshus Harabim. According to the Torah, between 9 up to 10, not exactly 9, but even a bit more than 9, up to 10 tefachim. But once you've got 10 tefachim, and it's 4 by 4, that now has a status of a Reshus HaYochid. If it hasn't got 4 by 4, then it's still a mokum patur. Okay? Okay, lots of permutations. Okay, let's carry on. Yud Aleph. Guma. Now, that's all above ground. Now we're going to say it's exactly true if it's underground, if it's the reverse of that. So, for example, Yud Aleph. Guma b'Reshus Harabim. If you've got a ditch in a Reshus Harabim, im eina amuka shalish have a Reshus Harabim. So this is just the reverse of what we've just said. If you've got a ditch, like a little bump in the ground, it goes down, and it's less than 3 tefachim, okay, it's bottled to the ground, it's considered a Reshus Harabim. Mishalish ad asara, if, however, the guma, the ditch, is between 3 and 10 tefachim, im rechava arba have a caramelis. If it's 4 by 4, then it will have the status of a caramelis. V'im lav, and if it's less than 4 by 4, then have a mokum patur. V'im hi amuka asara have a Reshus HaYochid. But if it's less than 10 tefachim, if it's more, it's deeper than 10 tefachim, then it has the status of a Reshus HaYochid. Okay, so it's just the reverse of what we've just said, going down. So again, if you've got a ditch in the Reshus Harabim, anything less than 3 tefachim is just considered part of the Reshus Harabim. If it's more than 10 tefachim deep, and it's 4 by 4 wide, then it's got a status of Reshus HaYochid. Anything less than that, for example, it's less than 10 tefachim deep, then if it's 4 by 4, then it's got a din of a caramelis, and less than 4 by 4, then it's got a din of a mokum patur. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eina amuka shalish, alfagav derechava kama tefachim. So if it's very narrow, this ditch is very narrow, it's very shallow, it's less than 3 tefachim, even though it's quite a wide ditch, nevertheless, it's got a din of Reshus Harabim. Ad asara, va'afilu hay Rabbim mishtamshim by, even if lots of people use it, tashmish alidei hatchaku v'lo yishay tashmish, and therefore it's not considered Reshus Harabim. Amuka asara, if it's more than 10 deep, afilu melei mayim oshad dvarim, even if it's full of water or other things, she'odem mistakel bohem v'roya mashe b'soich hamachitzas, and they see it. That's why then it's got a din of a Reshus HaYochid. Even though it might be full of things, it might be water, but as long as I can see the mechitzas, then it's got a din of a Reshus HaYochid. Avol in melei peiros, but if this ditch, which is 10 tefachim deep and 4 by 4 wide, is full of fruit, lo have a Reshus HaYochid, then it cannot have the status of a Reshus HaYochid. Why? Given the ein hamachitzas nikaris, because I can't see the walls of this ditch because it's full of fruit. And even if you intend to remove the fruit, or and that will exempt a person who throws l'soiche into it from Reshus Harabim, mikol makom isur yesh b'zeh. It's still also given da peres hu davar sheyochel litle misham b'Shabbos, because you can take the fruit from it on Shabbos. Lo nisbat legamri habar mishmei, and therefore it doesn't lose its status. V'larash b'dafka peres tevolim oishad dvarim she'asur l'taltzim mevatla mechitzas. Only things like tevel, which is mukta, and therefore only that will be mevatla mechitzas. Shetei rechova arba. Ve'imlav having mokum patur, less than 4 by 4 tefachim will be therefore a mokum patur. Va'afilu amoka esrim amma, even if it's 20 amas deep. If it's not 4 by 4 and 10 tefachim deep, then it will not be a Reshus HaYochid. But if it's less than 4 by 4, even if it's very deep, it will not have a status of Reshus HaYochid. It will only have a status of a mokum patur. Let's just do Yud Beis and then we'll finish. Reshus Harabim eina tefeses ela ad asara. So we said yesterday the Reshus HaYochid, the airspace above the Reshus HaYochid goes all the way up ad rokia. However, not true with the Reshus Harabim. Reshus Harabim eina tefeses ela ad asara. It only has the status of Reshus Harabim until 10 tefachim. Aval l'ma'ala me'asara have a mokum patur. Anything more than 10 tefachim in the Reshus Harabim airspace is considered a mokum patur. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Kotin Mem Gimel ela ad asara va'alkein. Therefore, if you throw a dvela shmeina, like a sticky, what's it called, like a fig cake, and it's like sticky, and you throw it v'nidbak b'koisel, and it sticks against the wool lemata me'asara chayev, because you've thrown into Reshus Harabim. Lemala me'asara is potter. Havimokim patur. And it's more than 10 tefachim high, and in Reshus Harabim it's got a status of a mokum patur. Rotzolema ta'afilu shem karmelis ein chal al ha'avir shel mal me'asara. It hasn't even got the status of a karmelis. Omnom im noatz kona b'Reshus Harabim. If you sort of stick a pole in Reshus Harabim of a roishe kli gavoya asara tefachim v'rochav arba, and at the top of this pole you've got an item which is 10 tefachim and 4 tefachim wide. Afal gav shetachter Reshus Harabim, even though underneath it it's got a din of Reshus Harabim, mikol mokum hakli hu Reshus hayochid. The kli has got a status of Reshus hayochid. Okay, so just to summarize what we've said today, we've defined the Reshus Harabim yesterday, and we've defined the Reshus hayochid. Now we're saying, what about entities in the Reshus Harabim? So anything within 3 tefachim of the ground, above it or below it, is bottled to the ground and has got a din of Reshus Harabim. If it's more than 10 tefachim and 4 by 4 tefachim on top or underneath, then that has a status of Reshus hayochid. And even if it's full, the ditch is full of water, if I can see the mechitas, it still has the stin of a Reshus hayochid. If it's less than that, it's up to 9 tefachim tall, then, and it's got 4 by 4 tefachim wide, then it's got a din of a karmelis. And if it's exactly 9 tefachim tall, and Rabbi Makassim, then it's got a stin of Reshus Harabim. If it's less than 4 by 4 tefachim, and it's not 9, and it's between 3 and 9 tefachim, then it's got a din of mokum patur. Say that? Okay.